I could not have been more indifferent going into the Wicked movie. I honestly cannot remember the last time I cared so little about something I paid to consume. It's kind of funny though, because I had the same attitude when I saw the Wicked musical on stage for the first time at the Ford Theater in Chicago. It was a field trip for the school band, and at that point in my 11 long years on Earth, I was already committed to making hates musicals a permanent part of my personality. To be fair, the only musicals I'd seen at that time were The Sound of Music and Grease, neither of which feature lasers or small robots turning into bigger robots, so I don't think a 5th grade boy was necessarily the target audience. But I'm getting sidetracked. The point is, I had the same reaction after sitting down to watch the movie this weekend as I did the musical 18 years ago. I was pleasantly surprised. I know, you'd think I would have learned from my past experience, but this time around I made the mistake of letting the movie's relentless advertising campaign wear me down. Like seeing this boring, bland poster plastered everywhere, then seeing the star Cynthia Erivo publicly attack a fan on social media for trying to erase her when all they did was edit the poster to resemble the far better designed Broadway musicals, just triggered this instinct in me where I wanted nothing to do with the project. Not to mention, every interview clip that showed up on my feed showed the lead actresses gently fondling each other and then bursting into crocodile tears at the most basic questions.
In what ways the person sitting next to you changed you for good?
Oh my gosh. Well.
Like their answers were so deep that we, the audience, could never understand, and only their raw emotions could truly capture them. It all felt so self-indulgent. And let's be honest, parts of this movie are definitely self-indulgent. The runtime alone is indicative of that. Taking a whopping 2 hours and 40 minutes, 10 minutes longer than the musical's entire runtime, just to get through what the musical does in its very first act. Yeah, in case you didn't know, the movie ends after defying gravity, normally where the musical would take the intermission. I didn't see that in any of the marketing, which feels deceptive to me. Like the old lady sitting next to me weren't aware of that and were very disappointed. I think those sneaky little hobbitses at the studio knew people wouldn't rush out to see the movie in theaters if they knew this was only part 1. Though I suppose if you had to break it into 2 parts, this was as good a point as any to do it. Elphaba's evolution into the Wicked Witch is complete. She's flying around like Neo at the end of The Matrix, but the movie takes twice as long as the musical to get to that point, so inevitably certain scenes and moments dragged on. This movie is like Bilbo in the Fellowship of the Ring.
I feel thin, sort of stretched, like butter scraped over too much bread.
But if you can sit through that and truly separate the art from these self-obsessed, want to be more important than they actually are artists, you'll have a good time. For those who don't know the story, Wicked was originally a book written by Gregory Maguire, who for legal purposes claims it's a prequel to L. Frank Baum's The Wonderful Wizard of Oz book. But let's be honest, he's obviously using the version of Oz and its characters that are shown in the 1939 film. Wicked reveals the origins of these characters with a focus on Elphaba, the Wicked Witch of the West, and Glinda, the Good Witch of the North. The two attend magic school together and start out as mortal enemies, but they become friends. No, wait. Best friends after a few kind gestures and an interpretive dance routine. Ultimately, Elphaba's magical talents land her an audience with the one and only Wizard of Oz. But after pulling a reverse Hagrid and revealing he's not a wizard Harry, he makes her public enemy number 1, forcing her to go into hiding while Glinda stays in Emerald City to protect her own neck while secretly staying allied with Elphaba.
The reason I'm telling you all this is because I'm playing both sides so that I always come out on top.
It's a genuinely entertaining and, dare I say, heartwarming story about the importance of being open-minded and standing up for those too weak or scared to do it themselves. And what I really love about this is that it communicates these messages without getting political. It doesn't come off as preachy or condescending like most of the garbage coming out of Hollywood these days. The story is not without its flaws, like why does anyone care if this girl has green skin when they live in a world where bears can be wet nurses? But it's got a little something for everyone, even some light action at the end. But even if you don't like the story, there's plenty else to appreciate. First though, a moment of appreciation for today's sponsor, Squarespace. If you wanted proof that magic is real, look no further than Squarespace's newest feature, Design Intelligence. Building on Squarespace's 2 decades of expertise in the world of website creation, Design Intelligence makes it possible for anyone to build their dream website. All you've got to do is describe your business, pick your qualities, your favorite colors, and Design Intelligence Designs handles the rest, generating a complete site loaded with all the features you need, which there is no shortage of, by the way. Squarespace makes it easy to sell homemade goods and other products, from listing them on your site, managing your inventory, to tracking them through the shipping process so you know they reach your customers safely. They've also got some incredible tools for artists. You can display your creations, be them visual or musical, and even create a members-only portion of your site for your paying customers to enjoy exclusive content. There's a reason Squarespace has been dominating the web design space for 2 decades. Just go to squarespace.com/Jon Solo or hit the link in the description to see why. And remember to use code Jon Solo for 10% off your first purchase. So like I said, there is a lot to love about Wicked. First off, the music f***ing slaps. I'm no musicologist, but that opening sequence of No One Mourns the Wicked with the brass and percussion just demands your attention, pulling you into this world in seconds. I don't think there's a single performance in this movie that rivals or even compares with the Broadway casts, specifically Kristen Chenoweth and Idina Menzel, and their brief cameo just reinforces that, but you can tell these performers were pouring their heart and soul into it. No one showed up to set just to get a paycheck, except maybe Jeff Goldblum. Speaking of, is there any way that we could, I don't know, how do I say, stop casting Jeff Goldblum in iconic character roles? I'm not saying the dude shouldn't work, he has plenty of entertainment value, but he's not a character actor. He just plays himself playing the character every single time. The credits should really say Jeff Goldblum as the Wizard of Oz. I think the wizard character would have been a lot more interesting if it was played by someone who would do the character justice and had real singing talent. For some reason, Gary Oldman is the first person that comes to mind, but I don't think he has quite the same selling power with TikTokers and Zoomers, which is who I think the casting director had in mind when making their choices. Following this theme, I think Ariana Grande was a complete miscast. I've heard other people say she killed it, and they can have that opinion, but in my opinion, she just doesn't have the elegance or poise that Kristen Chenoweth did, and I just wasn't buying it. I think that Cynthia Erivo did a great job though, not only with her vocals, but also her softer, more vulnerable take on the Elphaba character versus Idina Menzel's snarky and aggressive version. I will admit though that I'm having a much harder time believing that this witch could ever transform into the original Wicked Witch that haunted all of our childhoods. I had the same problem with Emma Stone as Cruella. Like, her acting in that movie was great, but this character is not the same as the one from the cartoon, or even Glenn Close's live-action portrayal. Returning to Oz, I also have to give praise to the costume and set designers, because I think they had a pretty intimidating task laid out before them, trying to capture the wackiness of Oz while staying grounded enough for the audience to believe a world could actually function this way. Basically, every single prop that appears on screen, no matter how trivial, looks like it was custom made by Ozian artisans. It didn't matter if it was only in the background or featured in a close-up. It reminds me of the old days in Hollywood when every single garment worn on screen was made in-house, no matter how basic and simple it was. Seriously though, if you watch the movie, look around each scene and just appreciate how much effort it took to make this world feel both fantastical and functional. They knocked it out of the park. They also deserve props, no pun intended, for taking the time to build full-size sets and avoid overusing CGI, though I do think these sweeping landscape shots all feel artificial, with Emerald City in particular looking like it was AI generated. And when it comes to animals, holy shit, there is not a single real animal in this movie. Everyone is computer generated and looks like it, which I just don't understand considering the play managed to pull this off with practical effects and it looked infinitely better. Not to mention the Wizard of Oz movie. There is no reason that the flying monkeys from 85 years ago should look better than the ones today, but that is absolutely the case. And before anyone comes at me saying their sprouting wings would have been too hard to pull off with practical effects, I'm just going to direct you to the transformation scene from An American Werewolf in London. 43 years later, and that transformation is still hauntingly realistic because of its use of makeup and prosthetics, whereas these new flying monkeys belong in a pre-rendered PS2 cutscene. I don't know who exactly is responsible for deciding these things, but to me it comes off as a lazy cop-out for people who lack imagination. And just to be clear, I'm not referring to the overworked, underpaid VFX artists who are doing their best with the limited time they have. I'm assuming the blame lies with the director or the Hollywood suits. CGI aside, if I could make one small change to their world building, I would have scrapped about 80% of the Ozian language they kept trying to make a thing, swapping out prefixes and suffixes just to make words sound silly. delicious. Saying things like gratitushin, disgustifying, pessimistical, moodified, braverism. Yeah, I wrote those down. At first I thought it was cute, but after the 10th or so time, I was over it. And there were about 50 more after that. But oddly enough, there was a moment where Glinda simply says, "I'm confused," and I couldn't help thinking, really? She's not confusicled? She's not perplexiosoed? I really thought she'd be bewildified. Okay, now I'm being annoying, but I've got one last gripe for this otherwise pretty good movie, and that's the choreography. It's way overdone. Some people are probably thinking, well, yeah, that's just how musicals are. But nah, I've gone back and looked at clips from the Broadway musical, and it was not this outrageous. I've got beef with What Is This Feeling in particular. There was no reason for Glinda's entourage to be moving every single point of articulation on every single beat. Contrary to what TikTok has made people believe, having a bunch of people moving in sync does not automatically look good. All this random spasming is completely pointless and makes the visual messy. Unless you like that sort of thing, but that's just my opinion, and believe it or not, despite all my negativity, I would recommend this movie to most people. It's not a 10 out of 10, I think the highest score I could give it would be an 8, and I do apologize if I focused a little too much on that missing 2, but I really do want to hear your opinion, so feel free to comment them down below. Even if you disagree with me, especially if you disagree with me. Reviews are weird because once they're posted, there's no changing them, even if you do change your mind later, and that may very well happen with me after reading some of your responses. I want to hear what you loved, what you hated, and what you're looking forward to with Wicked Part 2. Until next time, my name is Jon Solo, and remember, Jon shot first.